celebrating the Church of Uganda at 150 years, of course, celebrating early to create awareness. And in this particular sequel, the church celebrates the alignment of the local Baganda people calendar with the calendar of the Gregorian or of Pope Gregory. And then we are now bringing in the element of the unique calendar of the Bible, and see how all that was aligned just because of the wisdom of the Baganda people who first received the religious instructions from the missionaries, the evangelical missionaries who brought Christianity to Buganda in 1877 and beyond, all the way to 1879 and beyond. And so the Gregorian calendar is what I want to begin with now. The first month of the Gregorian calendar used to be, as a matter of fact, you cannot go to the Gregorian calendar without starting from the Roman calendar, because it came from the Roman calendar, then to the Julian calendar, and then to the Gregorian calendar. And so the very original calendar was a Roman calendar, and it began with the first month being Mars, the second month being Aprilis, the third month being Maia, the fourth month being Juno, the fifth month being Quintilius, the sixth month being Sextus, and then the seventh month simply being called Seven, which is Septo, the eighth month simply being called its own name, which is Octo, the ninth month being called its very name, Novembris, and the last month being called Deca, which simply meant 10. Now you can see the Baganda original calendar and the Roman calendar were the same. They were both 10 months. Actually, not 10 months, 10 seasons. Some seasons were lunar, some seasons were just what was happening in that season. Just like the Baganda, there was a very long season which was winter. So they could not differentiate between when and when. And the entire season was also 90 days, just like the Baganda dry spell. So for them it was winter, in Buganda it was dry spell. And it began in a Deca, so the entire Deca was almost lasting up to all the 90 days until the new year began in the month they called Mars. Now, the only unique thing is that when we looked at the Baganda names of the year, of the months of the year, they were basically names of what was happening in that particular month, whether the weather condition or there was some identified things happening like moths or insects or the weather pattern, and those were the names. Now, that was unlike the Romans. For the Romans, all the months were named after their gods, except a few last ones, which then became the names of the number. For example, the first month of the year, which was called Mars, was after their god of war. The second month, which was called Aprilis, was after their god of openings. Their third month, Maia, was after their female god, Maia, the wife, or the wife of a certain god, a goddess. Their fourth month, Juno, was a name of a female god, the wife of another god called Jupiter. The fifth month, Quintilius, was actually simply meaning the name 5. So they stopped naming them after the gods, and now they went for the meaning of the numbers. So Quintilius meant 5, and the month was called Quintilius. Sextus meant 6. So their sixth month was named the Sextus. Septo meant 7 in Latin. So the seventh month became Septo. The eighth month, on the number 8, was called Octo. So the eighth month became Octo. And the number 9 was called Novembris in Latin. So the ninth month was named Novembris. And of course, the last month, Deca, which was the 10th month, meant 10. So they also had 10 seasons. Then that changed. How did it change? They realized that they had a very powerful emperor, and his name was Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar reversed the beginning of the year from starting from Mars to actually begin within winter. So within winter, one season, after 90 days, after 30 days of winter, they decided to begin the month there by naming it after the god who opened the doors, and his name was Janus. So the middle of winter was named Janus as a season, and it was followed by another season which saw the reduction of winter, which was given the name Freboa. And Freboa was also a god who purifies, another Roman god who purifies. So this big season of winter now got 3 months. It had Deca, it had Janus, and it had Freboa. So the entire 90 days was broken up, just like the Baganda did to get Gatonya, to get Mukutula Sanja, and also to keep Ntemvu. So they also kept Deca, but introduced Janus, the Roman god of doorways and acts, and they also introduced Freboa, the Roman god who ritually purified. Just like the Baganda, theirs were gods, ours were what was happening on the ground, weather-wise, or what was happening on the ground. So then Mars, the month which used to begin their year, Mars, became a 3rd month. Aprilis became a 4th month. Maia became a 5th month. Juno became their 6th month. And now Julius Caesar seized on the 7th month to be named after him. That's why it is called up to today Julie, or if you want, July. His successor also introduced, Emperor Augustus, also introduced his own name to become the 8th month. So instead of that month which used to be called number 6, Sexas, it was now an 8th month because of the introduction of the month up there. And it also became a month called Augustus, or what we call August, named after the emperor. Why? Because these emperors had also transformed themselves into gods, and they will be worshipped as gods, even if they were still living human beings. They uplifted themselves into being gods, and they are worshipped. Then the 9th month was corrupted because these emperors wanted to name themselves after the months. Despite the fact that Septo meant 7, they pushed it in the 9th month. So number 7, which is called Septo in Latin, was named after a 9th month to become Septo. Now that was a real corruption, but they didn't matter. That's how power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So now people who are intelligent are naming a 9 to become a 7. It's a 9th month, but it is called Septo, which Septo means 7. That's how our September came about. Then the 10th month, instead of calling it Deca, because Deca already existed, they forced the 8th month, which means Octo, to become Octo. So the 10th month is called Octo, yet the word Octo means 8. Why? Because of the corruption of Julius Caesar and Augustus wanting to name themselves months. 11th month was named number 9. The number 9, which means Novembris, now takes over the name Novembris, which becomes the 11th month in that same Julian calendar. Another corruption. 12. Instead of naming 12 its name, it was instead forced to be called Deca, which means 10. And now our Deca, number 10, is named after number 12 month, which is December in terms of today. So that was the corruption I wanted to make very clear at the very moment, that Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar are the reasons why a ninth month is called a 7? Why a 10th month is called an 8? Why an 11th month is called a 9? And why a 12th month is called a 10 in Latin? Now, that is so much for aligning the Gregorian calendar to the Roman calendar to the Julian calendar, because even if the Gregorian calendar had begun by recognizing March as the first month of the year, it was later rectified also, and January or Janus was finally recognized as the first month. So now we have January to December, which are 12 months, and which we call the Gregorian calendar. But I must warn you, it's a very new calendar. It is less than 500 years old. As a matter of fact, in places like UK, this calendar is not even 300 years old in its usage. So it's very, very, very new. Now, when we go into the Bible, in the book of Exodus chapter 12, God instructed his own calendar. It is not because the Bible did not have a calendar. There was an earlier calendar. For example, in chapter 7 and 8 of the floods, we see a calendar there being used. But God reversed that calendar and introduced his own other calendar. So that means the Baganda transiting into a new calendar, that action is fully justified. Just like the Romans transited into a new calendar, which became a Julian calendar. Just like the Julian calendar transited into a Gregorian calendar. And therefore, we should therefore see the Baganda people as being very wise, yet not connected to these other worlds, but doing things the way even the other people in those worlds were doing them before we even became exposed to their history. So in Exodus 12, God instructs a calendar of his own. And for him, the first month was to be called Abibu or Abib. And it would be a month in which the Passover was celebrated. Now, this Passover is normally celebrated between the months of March to April, but never in May, or if in May, but very rarely. March and April are the culprits. So that, and it was a lunar calendar. It was a 12-month calendar, and it was a lunar calendar, beginning with the third month in the Gregorian calendar, which is March, but for them, they called it Abibu. The second month was called Ziv. The third month was called Sivani. The fourth month was called Tammuz. The fifth month was called Avu. The eighth month was called Eruli. The seventh month was called Tishri, although the Jews called it Esanimu. The eighth month was called Buli or Bul. The ninth month was called Kislev. The 10th month was called Tebesi. The 11th month was called Sabatu. And the 12th month for the Jews was called Adari. And Adari would sometimes have Adari 1 and Adari 2. But that cycle was also seasonal, and it is the main reason why our Easter holiday is not fixed. It rotates between March and April, depending on this biblical calendar Adari month, which sometimes a year has only one Adari, but sometimes a year has two Adaris. So when the Jewish year has another Adari, the Easter season or the Passover is pushed further away into late April. When there is no second Adari, that's when our Easter holiday is celebrated much earlier in March or earlier in April. So I think now you've understood why Easter holiday shifts the way it does. It is governed by this Hebrew calendar and the fact that it is always on the Sunday following the full moon, following the first full moon day. So when you see a full moon day, the next Easter Sunday is what is named Easter Sunday. The Sunday following the first full moon is Easter Sunday, but after the month of Adari has given a clue of whether it will be an early Easter or a late Easter. Now, having zeroed in on the biblical, Roman, Julius, the Baganda calendar, the next sequel will introduce us to that history that brought us to us being able to celebrate our own calendar. May the good Lord bless us all.